Well, good morning, everyone. So, I think for me, one of the key questions of my work is, how do we know people are learning? How do we know people are learning? And even more important than that, how are we telling our stories about learning? There are so many narratives about public education right now that are not telling the true story of how people are learning. And in fact, a lot of them I have actually called out as diversions lately. And I want to bring us back to our core work. I want you to just think for a minute about when you decided to be a teacher and when you got that first job. Why did you do that? What was your passion and your heart and your drive and your excitement? And do you remember that feeling when you got the call that they wanted you, they hired you from that panel of applicants? I had a chance to relive all that this year when I got a new job as a superintendent, and it's a little intimidating to be a brand new superintendent and have a steep learning curve and at year 26 be a rookie again. But you know what? It's all about how people are learning. And I want you to think too about, why is student growth such an important part of TPEP? How do we make it our core work and not just something to check off or get done? For me, student growth is why schools exist. It's a critical component. It's our core work. We are in existence as school districts so that we can help kids learn. And if we want to help kids learn, as the adults in the organizations, we all have to be committed to strengthening our own practice and making each year a little better than the one before it. I want to challenge you to broaden your view on student growth and how you approach it. Whatever you're doing, take a step back, slow down a little bit, and think about, how could I do this even better? I want you to think for a minute at your seats. It's March 1st. March, I think I've been told by a lot of teachers, and I remember this myself, this is the hardest month of the school year. Yes? Yes. So let's just soak that in. We're here. It's March. It's tough. But we are also at this critical point in the school year where we're over the halfway point, but we still have 3 glorious months left to do miracles with our kids. What are we going to do with the time we have left? How do we prioritize on the most important things that are going to make the biggest difference for the most kids? And again, how do you really know kids are learning? And how can you help everybody back in the buildings focus on that element? Especially when we're tired. But really take a moment. What does it look like, sound like, and feel like? I had dinner with a couple of friends of mine last night. They're both retired in their 70s and are former math teachers. And they became math teachers when they were just about the only women in their college math classes. One of them shared with me a story that she sat down in the front row of her class the first day of school in college at Stanford. And the gentleman next to her leaned over and said, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" And she persevered and had a beautiful career in mathematics and continues to inspire me today. But it made me think, how many people would have not come back to that class after that kind of feedback? And how are we making sure that our words about education and directly to our students and our colleagues are positive and encouraging, and not even unintentionally sending the message, you don't belong here? My other friend Carol, also a math teacher, described herself as a young sweet thing in 1965 when she walked into Frick Junior High School in the Oakland School District. And they actually had a lockdown that year because there was a student on campus with a gun. And she didn't know how to approach that, but she said, you just did it. And she said at the end of the year, her superintendent handed her an evaluation and said, "I can tell your students are learning." And she said her response was, "How? How do you know they're learning?" And I thought it was fabulous that she shared that story with me yesterday. She had no idea I was going to be delivering this keynote address today on that issue. But that's the question. How do we know they're learning? And how are we giving meaningful feedback and evaluations? Student growth is student learning. And if you happen to be in a place where it hasn't popped up to the priority yet, it's okay. Just bump it up. But if we define student growth as student learning, how do we not make it a priority? And if we're not setting goals that are helping all kids, are we really setting the right goals? I've had the opportunity to work with teachers and principals and other educators, kids all over the place. And when we were first starting this out, student growth was really scary for people, and I think it still is, because there's this underlying idea that it has to be a SMART goal and it has to be tied to test scores. But again, if we take a step back and we slow down and we think about, what is it that I really need to improve in my practice? What is it that I need to learn how to do? And what is it that my students consistently struggle to learn? And if we commit to working on all of these things together, I think it's a little bit easier to take some risks. But as teachers and principals, we also have to encourage people not to just do the bare minimum. And I understand why people do that. When something's new or unclear, or if our jobs are on the line, we want to make sure that we're successful, so we set an attainable goal. I completely understand that. Attainable goals that I've seen people work on are things like a 1-week plan. I had a pre-conference with a teacher years ago. This was when TPEP just first started. And it was probably late September, early October. And I sat down to talk to him about student growth, and he said, "Oh, I'm already done with that." And I said, "Really?" "Yeah, I did that a couple weeks ago. I gave a pre-test, I taught them some stuff, I gave them a post-test, and they all did better." And he was serious, and that was how we started. But he was really worried when we kind of broke it down and talked about it more. He was really worried that he wasn't going to be successful and that his job was going to be on the line. And that's a real thing. Another teacher I worked with, PE teacher, this is an elementary PE classroom, 30 kids every 30 minutes. And one of the things he noticed was that a lot of the transition time was eating into his instructional time. And he came up with this beautiful plan to teach the kids how to come in, set up, clean up, and really maximize the instructional time. But he wanted the behavior structure that he had established, and he had great data, he wanted that to be his student growth goal. And I encouraged him to think about what he did to create more instructional time and what he was doing with his instructional time as a student growth goal, and how the kids were learning more about PE. So sometimes, and certainly recognize the behavior plan as part of his evaluation overall. And I've worked with a school district, or 2 or 3, who teach their school district employees, yeah, we know student growth is a requirement. We're not going to make that the priority. We're just going to get it done. And that gets back to that checkbox. Let's be committed to doing more with student growth than just a checkbox. So this is where it comes in. Take a risk. Think of something you've always wanted to do, but are afraid to do, or don't know how to approach it. Think of a real problem in your school or your classroom. A student who has been performing below grade level for years, and we just keep lowering our standards. What if we didn't? Something that's a little intimidating. Leaders, do you model your own student growth goals? Do you put those out for others so that your staff know what you're working on? Teachers, do you keep your goals front and center? Do you share your progress with your colleagues? Do your students know what you're working on? Ask yourselves right now, how many of you know and could recite to your neighbor, this is my student growth goal this year. This is what we're working on, and this is how I know we're making progress, and this is what we need to do in the next 3 months to continue making progress. Principals, how many of you can share the gist of your teacher student growth goals? The big ideas that they're working on. It's March. We should be deeply embedded in our work by now. Infuse some energy. Think of this in terms of excitement. We get to work with kids every day. Make this something that's fun. Remind ourselves, this is why we became teachers, to help kids. How do we make student growth not just attainable, while it's also a risk, a challenge, learning something new, but also fun? This is why we became teachers. And I, for one, as a superintendent, I love hearing the success stories of student learning. I really encourage all of you to remember that at the heart of all this work is the relationship. Kids need to know that you're there for them. The teachers need, if you're a principal, the teachers need to know that you're there for them. And it needs to be an environment that is caring and safe for risk-taking. It takes a bit of a different kind of leadership to do this work. I used to tell people when I was first a TPEP facilitator that I like to put the PEP in TPEP. I still talk about it that way. This is fun for me. I told my staff, yes, I get to go do 2 days of TPEP. And they looked at me like, are you crazy? Yeah, a little. But you know what? I love my job. And I want us all to talk about how much we love our jobs, even when it's hard. And I want us to be willing to do the hard work for kids. And as we continue to focus on student learning, especially with all of the conversations about school safety right now, which cannot be ignored, when we talk about school safety, to me, the number one thing we have to be talking about is how we're making people feel and the emotional climate of our schools. That goes for this work too. If kids feel safe, if they feel loved, if teachers know that they can take risks without being belittled, or if failing is okay, if they try something that doesn't work, it's not going to cost them their job, we're going to start eliminating the boundaries and the barriers to what's keeping us from thriving. For me, I used to have long hair. I cut my hair, you can see that. These are my 2 kids, Jack and Molly. I had the great privilege of handing Jack his diploma last year. I was his high school principal. I hope to do the same next year for Molly. She's in Belgium this year, learning more things than I could ever teach her. But I have always promised myself that whatever I was willing to do for my own kids, I'm willing to do for anyone's kids. And I stand by that today. I'm not afraid to make mistakes. I don't like it. I don't like letting people down. But I'm willing to have the tough conversations, and I'm willing to help anyone make their dreams come true. I hope that will help all of you get through March and make the rest of the year phenomenal. Thank you very much.